close to the end of the year, I'm thinking ahead to what's happening in 2024, and one of the things I'm looking forward to the most is a LAN happening in February called Genesis 10. This tournament series is really pretty special, and it just so happens that we're coming up on the deadline for the main registration period, where after January 3rd it'll be more expensive, so I wanted to get the word out before that happens. I'm not being paid to make this video or anything. I did smile cutely and bat my eyelashes to get some graphics and get permission to use their tournament footage, but I personally want to talk about it for two reasons. One, I still need teammates because my team isn't going and I want to leverage my platform to find some. Consider this a +3 post. If you're Div 4-ish and need a short-range shooter player, DM me. But two, I was a Super Smash Bros. Melee player first, and the Melee community's history is deeply interconnected with the Splatoon community's history in a lot of ways. To this day, our major LANs are mostly at Melee tournaments. This tournament series is, in my opinion, the single most important series of Smash tournaments ever. It's been a long time, 3 whole years, since the last time Splatoon was played in the Genesis series of tournaments, so this is the first Genesis that will ever have Splatoon 3, and I would love it if we could have a good showing there to encourage them to bring us back in the future. The story of the Genesis series goes back well before Splatoon existed, but the impact that it had on the culture of our community and the resources we now have available for running our events was really important. Super Smash Bros. Melee was popular enough competitively to feature as the only other game in the MLG circuit besides Halo for several years in a row. But when its sequel, Brawl, came out, it caused a bit of a split in the community. Some players were willing to move on to the new game like the MLG folks and Nintendo expected would happen, but a lot of the people who really loved Melee didn't feel at all the same way about Brawl. A lot of other communities would have just bit the bullet and moved on anyway. When Street Fighter V came out, there was a lot of backlash from the competitive scene about the changes, especially since Street Fighter IV was very well liked and still running successful tournaments, but people still just transitioned to the next game, and Street Fighter IV dried up a bit. But building on the momentum from some pioneering Melee YouTubers putting up consistent tournament footage, combo videos, the Wombo Combo clip, and a set that went viral from a tournament called Revival of Melee, the first Genesis tournament managed to become the largest Melee tournament up until that point, even though the sequel to Melee was out and actively being played, and they did so without sponsorships or Nintendo's blessing or anything other than grassroots community organization. Genesis was the event that proved that a grassroots competitive scene for a Nintendo game could grow unassisted. It established a DIY sensibility and an independence from Nintendo that has grown and emboldened the community to criticize Nintendo and push back against overreaches like their attempt to block Smash from being in EVO 2013. It's an ethos that has always been a part of how other competitive Nintendo titles, like Splatoon and Mario Kart, view their relationships with Nintendo and how they operate, because the Melee community figured it all out first. We don't have the big LAN tournaments we have today because of Nintendo. They advertised the game, implying that they intended to get it into big stadiums to huge audiences, but we all know that never happened. They run some big online events that culminate in small in-person invitationals, but for most people, you're not making it to an in-person Nintendo-run Splatoon tournament unless you choose to go as a spectator. We have large in-person events where everyone can play, because the Smash community is already running big tournaments like that, and recognizing our kinship with them, they set aside one of the ballrooms for us to do our thing. LTC and Riptide are exactly the same deal, all Smash tournaments, and all arising out of the same tradition that started with Melee organizers like Bobak, the head TO who ran Genesis in 2009, and who's back now running Genesis for the 10th time, 15 years later. There's no pretension to it, no corporate interest that corrodes its ethos. It's just a good, big tournament. Our biggest LANs have always been Melee tournaments. Our biggest prize pool we ever raised was from an invitational we spun together literally overnight to protest Nintendo's decision to shut down a Melee tournament. We learned how to make rule sets for a competitive title from taking the Melee rule set and adapting it to our new game. This is, like I've said, what I think is the single most important Melee, even Smash tournament to the community's history, and it's been 3 years since Splatoon has been run at it. I'd really love for us to have such a strong showing here that they feel like they have no choice but to bring us back next time. My first LAN as part of a steady team was Genesis 7, my first time meeting Devi and Milana and Barry and Popgun and our longtime friends and rivals InkSync in real life. It was the first time I ever cast at a LAN, my first interaction with high-level Salmon Run since there was a side event for it there. Just So many good things, and such a great place for all of them to happen. I'll also be there to play some Melee, and if you saw at Riptide, you know I'm happy to play some friendlies and teach people that game too. Maybe we can get something going like the Ultimate Frisbee game we played at Riptide. I've been itching to play some dodgeball. Who knows, maybe we can find gym space somewhere. But there's gotta be someone to play it with, and that's where you, hopefully, come in. There's no need to have a steady team. Lots of teams, probably even most of the teams there, will be pickups, so there will be no shortage of players looking for someone to play with online. Obviously, if you can't make it, that's fine. Nobody's mad at you. It seems to be an impression some people get when I talk about tournaments sometimes, and I don't get it. But at the same time, man, would it be cool to have you there. The registration link is in the description. If you're going, get registered soon before prices go up at the January 3rd deadline. Make sure not just to register soon, but to lock down travel and accommodation plans. I always recommend housing at the hotel, so you can just walk out of your room down a few hallways and be at your pools, but lots of people will also use Airbnbs and the like nearby for their affordability, provided they have a reliable way to get to the venue from there. Be good to each other, remember to DM me if you need a player for the tournament, and I'll see you in San Jose.